Is Gmail killing independent email? Indirectly. More directly, spammers are killing independent email. Email's peer node trust story is so version 1.0 internet that webmasters are left basically using heuristics, shared models, and tea leaves to determine whether arbitrary incoming messages should be trustworthy or not. And they should not, is a good first pass guess. So Google, as the 1,000-pound gorilla, is serving as a lightning rod for a larger network effect problem, which is, users generally consider themselves better served if most unsolicited email they receive with no strong trust priors drops into a black hole. But that makes it very hard to be a newcomer who wants to establish trust priors.
I run my own email server in part, so I could implement a spam filtering strategy that had access to my outgoing mail. Anything received from someone I sent mail to is assumed non-spam, and that is the anchor for the rest of the filtering. I was planning to build a pretty sophisticated Bayesian filter on top of that, but it turned out to be unnecessary. The strategy I ended up with, which has served me well for many years now, is block a small number of extremely spammy TLDs. There are about a dozen of these, including biz, CASA, etc. Anything received from someone I've sent mail to, or a sender I've previously marked as good, is assumed good. Anything received from an address whose name contains an English word on a relatively short list of spammy words, discount, offer, etc., is assumed spam. Anything received from an address that I have received email from before and not marked as good is assumed spam. That leaves emails from addresses that are sending me email for the first time. These are overwhelmingly spam. But after the 4 filters above, there are few enough of these that I just scan them manually once a day or so. The real key here is treating the first email from any given address as essentially a contact request, with the default action being deny in the future. That just turns out empirically to work incredibly well. More than 90% of my spam is from repeat offenders.
Kind of semi-tangential, but you mentioned biz and CASA. What are the other most spammy TLDs you've encountered?
Here is the complete list. Top, TV, biz, rocks, rue, science, bid, date, CASA, buzz, work.
Heuristics, shared models, and tea leaves. I have no idea how blocking TLDs of entire countries with hundreds of millions of citizens can be considered a valid anti-spam advice. Just like the parent comment explained, you are actively pushing all of those people into the hands of Gmail, or Yandex in this case.
Spam is killing tons of services beyond just email. YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Craigslist. Nearly anything public is bombarded with spam. The big players are far better suited to deal with it than any newcomers, and even they can barely manage it on their own platforms.
And it's not even limited to online or free. My snail mail is 90% spam, even though people have to pay for it to be printed and delivered physically to my door. I wish I had spam filtering for USPS.
In Germany, a sticker saying no ads or free newspapers is legally binding. Repeated violations are quickly fined. It's opt-out, but great otherwise.
Something junk mail funds a large part of USPs.
For automatically dealing with the type of spam that is frequently seen in YouTube comments, I can't help but wonder if perhaps a continuously trained LLM would be well suited. YouTube spam comments tend to have highly atypical patterns, using things like Unicode characters to avoid triggering keyword and URL filters. Something along the lines of GPT should pick up on these things pretty easily, and could similarly pick up on the actions these comments are requesting of users, message me on Telegram, etc. It could also probably detect when spammers are trying to impersonate YouTubers. It's not really the kind of thing that spammers can use LLMs themselves to work around either. Any attempt to get past the anti-spam LLM is going to look quite unusual compared to the typical comment which would tip it off. Strangely, Google seems reticent to try something in this vein though.
Spam email would likely be reduced 99% if it cost the sender a penny to send each email. To implement, establish an email header field for a token. The tokens are one-time use and can be purchased from some token selling authority. The recipient can check with the selling authority if it is valid. If it is missing or invalid, it goes to the junk folder.
Google has the best spam filters so far. I wonder though, with the advent of new LLM models, it should now be trivially possible to build a zero-shot spam filtering bot that is self-hosted. Having an old Gmail account and a current Fastmail one, I disagree.
Users generally consider themselves better served if most unsolicited email they receive with no strong trust priors drops into a black hole. What is the evidence for this claim? Not Microsoft or Google acknowledge they drop email.
The fact that they don't acknowledge it doesn't mean they don't drop it. I've had to set up someone's mail server last year. All mails sent to Gmail were silently dropped until we set up all the current buzzwords for the domain email server. Then they magically started to show up. Possibly we were lucky that just setting up SPF, DKIM, etc. fixed it.
Over the last year, I ended a 20-plus year long run of hosting my own email, and email for a handful of other people and businesses I had a relationship with, entirely because of Gmail's behavior. People here saying it's spam, not Gmail, are being distracted from the numerous issues that independent mail services do have with Gmail. Gmail is extremely uncooperative at accepting email from services that aren't Gmail, Comcast sometimes, or Microsoft. You can have everything configured correctly, on an IP you've owned for years, and aggressively manage any outbound spam, and Gmail will still hate your guts and bounce your email, or file it in the recipient's junk folder. Before Gmail got huge, email service providers typically offered an avenue for addressing false positives in their filtering systems. Gmail really pioneered the "nah, screw you" approach to this. Meanwhile, Gmail is itself a huge source of spam. I maybe perversely loved hosting my email and email for a handful of other people. It's fun. Gmail took all the fun out of it and turned it into a seething hatred.
So I've run simple postfix plus Django emails for transaction confirmations, password resets, and in a few cases, 2FA, for a bunch of different sites I've worked on since I started my freelance business 6 years ago. I've never had a single complaint that my emails weren't delivering, nor has an email ever gone to spam folder in testing. How did I do it? The answer is simple. I didn't send any spam. The last time this came up on Hacker News, one of the top comments was something to the effect of, "We did double confirmation and a variety of other measures to avoid being marked as spam, but ultimately the entire time we're just one bad email campaign away from being blacklisted." One bad email campaign? Is there any other kind? That's just spam. The user didn't say this, but I bet money their double confirmation starts with a default checkbox with small text asking for permission to send emails. Every time I've talked to someone who has problems with email deliverability, if I dig into what they're doing, it quickly becomes clear to me that they're sending spam. But they're so indoctrinated in corporate culture that they don't even know that what they're sending is spam. Here's some translations for you. Marketing email equals spam. Lead generation equals spam. In most cases, newsletter equals spam. Sale announcement equals spam. Promotion equals spam. I'm not claiming my experience is universal. I'm sure that there is a non-zero percentage of sites sending legitimate emails getting marked as spam. But it seems to me that more often than not, the reason your emails are marked as spam is that they are in fact spam. And most strategies people discuss for avoiding being marked as spam are just avoiding the most obviously egregious forms of spam and finding users with higher tolerance for spam.
I run a site for a large corporate client. People can sign up to get a quote from a regional dealer for a specific type of complex product. To get a quote, they have to fill out several forms and select detailed specification, etc., and choose email as the way to deliver the quote. We regularly have users flag the email they receive from this process as spam. I have personally called to follow up in some cases to understand if our service was being abused or what the issue was. It was eye-opening. One user said, "Oh yeah, I wanted that when I filled out the form, but not when I got the email." Several marked the proposal as spam because they didn't like the final quote that was put together from their requirements. Several said things like, "I get too much email," and when pressed as to why they checked the box that said they wanted their quote delivered as an email, replied that they didn't know, or they changed their minds, or they didn't want an email, or they didn't want a plain text email, or their name was not in the subject line of the email, or that their company name was not in the subject line of the email. This is a very low volume, very expensive, highly technical product. We're talking maybe a dozen requests per day nationwide. So those people flagging the emails as spam have a significant impact on the overall deliverability to services like mail.
Spam in general is killing email. If you were out on a walk and 9 out of 10 people were trying to mug you, you'd very quickly adjust your behavior to only walk in very safe places and let as few people as possible access that area. There is a significant cost in spam protection by tracking reputation and content for the unending ocean of bullshit flooding the SMTP lines. Most providers want to cut communication with the spam source as quickly as possible to reduce costs.
It goes without saying that our messages are not spam. Hey, no. I don't know what it is with these people who think their God gave them the inalienable right to send messages without rate limits, just because they are signed with DKIM. The most likely explanation for why that site's school interviews got rate limited is people marked their junk as spam, and their sending IPs got bumped down into the bozo quota. And the most likely reason for people to have marked them as spam is they failed to do verified double opt-in, and just started spamming away at whatever address their customers mistakenly typed.
Spam is killing independent email. Gmail is fairly good at blocking it, is easy enough to get into, so it's been winning for years. I used to run independent email. It took constant work to get close to Gmail's level of spam blocking. So I switched. Found most alternatives weren't anywhere near good enough, and I don't have enough hours in the day even for my own email.